There are things the Holy Spirit will not stay around, and not because he is harsh, not because he is distant, but because he is holy. And where he is not honored, he quietly withdraws, and you may not even notice the moment he steps back. There is no thunder, no warning, no loud departure, just a silence, a stillness, a heaviness where his sweetness once was. And then suddenly prayer feels empty, and worship feels like words, and then the fire is gone. And the Holy Spirit cannot stand what is not surrendered, and he is not drawn to talent. He is not impressed by performance. He is not moved by how loud you speak or how beautifully you sing, and he is drawn to one thing: surrender. And total, complete, unreserved surrender. And you can have the right words and still miss him. And you can build platforms, gather crowds, and still be void of his presence. And because he does not rest where self is still on the throne. And oh, listen carefully, and the Holy Spirit cannot stand pride, and pride is the silent poison of the soul. It whispers, "You did this." It craves recognition. It resists correction. It refuses to bow, and in the moment pride enters, his presence begins to lift, and not in anger but in grief. And because pride shuts the door to intimacy, and he will not force his way in, and he cannot stay where there is hidden sin, and you may cover it from people. You may hide it behind a smile, behind ministry, behind activity, but nothing is hidden from him. And what you refuse to surrender will separate you from the depth of his presence. And he is not repelled by your weakness, but he is grieved by your resistance. And there is a difference, and weakness invites him, but resistance pushes him away. And the Holy Spirit cannot stand a divided heart, and half for God, half for the world. And one moment in worship, another moment in compromise. And he is not looking for perfection, and he is looking for possession. And he wants all of you, and every thought, and every desire, and every hidden place. And he does not share his dwelling, and he fills, or he waits. And many are waiting, not because he is far, but because they have not fully opened the door. And oh, but hear this, and he is gentle, and so gentle. And he will not shout over your distractions, and he will not compete with your idols. And he will simply become silent. And in that silence you must decide, and is his presence worth more than your pride? And is his nearness worth more than your habits? And is his voice worth more than your control? And because when you truly surrender, and when you lay down your will, and when you say, "Not my way but yours," and something holy begins to happen, and his presence returns, and not as a feeling, but as a reality and a weight, and a glory, and a knowing that he is there, and in that presence you are changed, and not by effort, but by encounter. And so if you feel the distance, and if the fire has dimmed, and do not chase emotions, and do not try to recreate moments, and go back to surrender, and lay it all down, and every hidden thing, and every ounce of pride, and every divided desire, and whisper from the depths of your soul, and Holy Spirit, I give you everything. And when he sees a heart fully yielded, and he will come, and he will stay. There is a sacred sensitivity to the presence of the Holy Spirit that many overlook. He does not force himself into spaces where he is merely acknowledged but not truly honored. Honor is more than words, it is the posture of the heart, the quiet reverence that says, "You are welcome here, not just in name, but in authority." When that honor is missing, something subtle begins to shift. The atmosphere may still be filled with activity, with sound, with movement, yet the depth, the weight, the undeniable awareness of his nearness begins to fade. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but gently, almost unnoticed at first, and he responds to how he is treated. Where he is revered, he rests. Where he is ignored, resisted, or taken lightly, he withdraws. Not because he is offended in a human sense, but because his nature cannot remain where he is not valued. You can continue speaking, singing, even praying, and still miss him entirely if your heart is not bowed in honor. It is possible to create an appearance of devotion while lacking the one thing he responds to most, genuine reverence. And honor is seen in obedience, in attentiveness, in the willingness to pause when he moves and to listen when he speaks. When those moments are brushed aside, when his gentle promptings are ignored, the relationship begins to grow distant. The voice that was once clear becomes faint, not because he has stopped speaking, but because the heart has stopped honoring. And in that quiet withdrawal, there remains an invitation to return to a place of deep reverence, where every thought, every action, every desire acknowledges his rightful place. Pride is one of the most subtle yet powerful barriers between the soul and the presence of the Holy Spirit. It does not always appear as arrogance or loud self-exaltation. Often it hides beneath confidence, achievement, even spiritual activity. It whispers quietly, convincing the heart that it is sufficient on its own, that it can manage, lead, and function without complete dependence. And in that quiet elevation of self, the sensitivity to his presence begins to dull, and the Holy Spirit is drawn to humility, to the heart that recognizes its need, its weakness, its absolute dependence on him. But pride resists that posture. It avoids surrender. It resists correction. It closes itself to conviction. When he gently nudges, pride explains it away. When he calls for deeper yielding, pride delays. And over time, that resistance creates distance, not because he desires it, but because he will not override a will that refuses to bow. And pride seeks recognition, even in spiritual things. It wants to be seen, to be acknowledged, to feel important. It can turn moments meant for his glory into platforms for self. And when the focus shifts from him to self, even slightly, the atmosphere changes. The purity of his presence cannot fully remain where attention is divided between his glory and human elevation. And there is a grief that pride causes, a quiet withdrawing of the depth that once was felt so strongly. The outward form may remain intact, but the inward fire begins to weaken. His voice becomes less distinct, not because he is silent, but because pride has created a barrier that dulls the ability to hear, and in that place, the invitation still lingers, calling the heart back to humility, back to a posture of surrender. Where self is laid down and he alone is lifted, hidden sin creates a quiet separation that the heart often tries to ignore. It does not always announce itself loudly. It lingers in secret places, in thoughts, in habits, in choices that are kept away from the light. You may continue outward expressions of faith, continue speaking the right words, continue moving through spiritual routines. Yet something within begins to feel distant, restrained, unable to fully connect as it once did. And the Holy Spirit is not repelled by weakness. But hidden sin is different. It is not simply falling short, it is the choosing to conceal, the unwillingness to bring what is broken into his light. And where there is concealment, there cannot be full communion. His nature is pure, and his presence brings light, and anything kept hidden resists that light. Not because he rejects you, but because what is hidden has not been surrendered. And there is a tension that begins to grow within the soul. A quiet knowing that something is not aligned, that something is interrupting the flow of intimacy. The voice that once felt close now seems distant, not because he has moved far away, but because the heart has closed off a place that he desires to fill. And that one closed place becomes a barrier to deeper fellowship, and hidden sin weighs on the spirit. It dulls sensitivity. It weakens conviction over time. What once stirred the heart deeply begins to feel normal, acceptable, easier to justify. And in that slow shift, the awareness of his presence becomes less vivid, less immediate, less alive, and yet, even in that state, there remains a gentle call, not of condemnation, but of invitation, drawing the heart toward honesty, toward openness, toward a place where nothing is withheld and everything is brought into his light. A divided heart is one of the quietest struggles, because it often feels normal. It learns to live in two places at once, reaching for God while still holding on to what pulls in the opposite direction. Outwardly, there may be devotion, moments of sincerity, expressions of love toward him. Yet inwardly there are attachments that remain untouched, areas that have not been fully yielded. And in that tension, something sacred is limited. And the Holy Spirit does not dwell in fragments. He does not occupy a portion while something else claims the rest. His presence is not meant to be an addition to a life already ruled by competing desires. He comes to fill, to lead, to take rightful place within every part of the heart. But when there are divided loyalties, when the soul hesitates between surrender and control, the depth of his presence is restrained, and there is a subtle inconsistency that begins to appear. One moment, there is hunger for him, a longing to be close, to feel his nearness. The next moment, there is a turning back to familiar patterns, to thoughts and desires that pull away from that very closeness. It creates an instability, a fluctuation that makes it difficult to remain anchored in his presence. The heart becomes restless, unable to fully settle, because it has not fully chosen, and the Holy Spirit responds to wholeheartedness. He moves where there is a clear yes, where there is no negotiation, no hidden reservation. A divided heart cannot fully host what is whole and holy. And so there is a quiet holding back, not of his willingness, but of the measure in which he can manifest, and within that space, there is a gentle drawing, a call toward unity within the heart, where every desire aligns, where every affection is brought under his authority. Where nothing competes and nothing is withheld, there is something within human nature that resists surrender at its deepest level. It is the desire to remain in control, to hold on to personal will, to shape outcomes according to one's own understanding. Even in spiritual pursuit, self can remain quietly enthroned, directing decisions, filtering obedience, choosing what to yield and what to keep. And as long as self holds that place, the fullness of the Holy Spirit cannot dwell as he desires. And the Holy Spirit does not come to coexist with self-rule. He comes to lead, to govern, to transform from the inside out. But his leadership requires a yielding that goes beyond surface-level devotion. It reaches into intentions, motives, desires, and replaces them with his own. And this is where the struggle begins, because self does not easily step aside. It negotiates, it delays. It offers partial surrender while holding back the deeper places. And to die to self is not an outward act alone. It is an inward yielding where personal rights are laid down. It is the quiet decision to release control, to trust beyond understanding, to say yes even when it costs comfort, recognition, or familiarity. It is choosing his way when every part of you leans toward your own. And in that surrender, something profound begins to shift within the soul. And the grip of self weakens, and the sensitivity to his presence increases. Where there was once resistance, there is now openness. Where there was striving, there is now a resting under his direction. The heart becomes a place where he can move freely, without interruption, without competition, and as self continues to fade, his influence becomes more evident, shaping thoughts, guiding steps, forming a life that reflects not personal will. But his presence working from within total surrender is not a moment of emotion. It is a posture that reaches into every part of the heart and lays it open before the Holy Spirit. It is the quiet yielding of control, the releasing of personal desires, the willingness to let go of what feels secure in order to embrace what he desires. Many approach him with partial openness, offering certain areas while keeping others guarded. But his manifest presence responds to a heart that holds nothing back, and there is a depth of his presence that cannot be experienced through surface-level devotion. It is not found in routine, not sustained by words alone, but revealed in the place where the soul has fully yielded. When everything is surrendered, there is no resistance left to hinder his movement. The barriers fall, the striving ceases, and the heart becomes a resting place where he can dwell freely, and surrender invites his nearness in a way nothing else can. It creates an openness, a sensitivity, an awareness that begins to recognize even his gentlest touch. What once felt distant becomes intimate. What once seemed unclear becomes deeply known. His voice carries a different weight, not as something external, but as something alive within, guiding, shaping, leading with quiet authority. And there is a transformation that flows from this place. Not forced, not manufactured, but birthed out of his presence resting upon a yielded life. Old desires begin to lose their hold. New affections take root. The heart starts to align with what pleases him, not out of obligation, but out of a deep inner change. And in that surrendered state, his presence is no longer something visited occasionally, but something carried continually, a constant awareness that he is near, that he is moving, that he is shaping every part of the life yielded completely to him.